Shaul came down to Debri and went on to Lystra, where there lived a Talmud named Timothy. He was the son of a Jewish woman who had come to trust, and a Greek father. All the brothers in Lystra and Iconium spoke well of Timothy. Shaul wanted Timothy to accompany him, so he took him and did Brit Milah, because the Jews living in those areas, for they all knew that his father had been a Greek. As they had went through the towns, they delivered the people the decisions reached by the emissaries and the elders of Jerusalem for them to observe. Accordingly, the congregations were strengthened in the faith and increased in number day by day. They traveled through the region of Phrygia and Galatia because they had been prevented by the Ruach HaKodesh from speaking the message in the province of Asia. When they had come to the frontier of Mysia, they tried to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Yeshua would not let them. So after passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. There a vision appeared to Shaul at night. A man from Macedonia was standing and begging him, "Come over here to Macedonia and help me." As soon as he had seen the vision, we lost no time getting ready to leave for Macedonia, for we concluded that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. Sailing straight from Trios, we made a straight run to Samothrace. The next day they went to Neapolis. From there we went on to Philippi, a Roman colony and the leading city of that part of Macedonia. We spent a few days in the city, then on Shabbat, we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we understood a minyan met. We went down and began speaking to the woman who had gathered there. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in fine purple cloth. She was already a God-fearer, and the Lord opened her heart to respond to what Shaul was saying. After she and the members of her household had been immersed, she gave us this invitation: "If you consider me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay in my house." And she insisted till we went. Once, when we were going to the place where the minyan gathered, we were met by a slave girl who had in her a snake spirit that enabled her to predict the future. She earned a lot of money for her owners by telling fortunes. This girl followed behind Shaul and the rest of us and kept screaming, "These men are servants of God Ha-Elyon. They're telling you how to be saved." She kept this up day by day until Shaul, greatly disturbed, turned and said to the spirit, "In the name of the Yeshua Messiah, I order you to come out of her." And the spirit did come out of her at that very moment. But when her owners saw that what had been done, what had come out was any further prospect of profit for them, they seized Shaul and Silas and dragged them to the market to face the authorities. Bringing them to the judges, they said, "These men are causing a lot of trouble in our city, since they are Jews. What are we doing and advocating customs that are against the law for us to accept or practice, since we are Romans?" The mob joined in on the attack against them, and the judges tore their clothes off them and ordered them to be flogged. After giving them a severe beating, they threw them in prison, charging the jailer to guard them securely. Upon receiving such an order, he threw them into the inner cell and clapped their feet securely between heavy blocks of wood. Around midnight, Shaul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, while the other prisoners listening attentively. Suddenly, there was a violent earthquake, which shook the prison to its foundations. The doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. The jailer awoke, and when he saw the doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, for he assumed that the prisoners had escaped. But Shaul shouted, "Don't harm yourself, we're all here." Calling for lights, the jailer ran in, began to tremble, and fell down in front of Shaul and Silas. Then, leading them outside, he said, "Men, what must I do to be saved?" They said, "Trust in the Lord Yeshua, and you will be saved, you and your household." Whereupon they told him and everyone in his household the message about the Lord. Then, even at that late of the night, the jailer took them and washed off their wounds, and without delay he and all his people were immersed. After that, he brought them up to his house and set food in front of them. He and his entire household celebrated their having come to trust in God. The next morning, the judges sent police officers with the order, "Release those men." The jailer told Shaul, "The judges have sent word to release both of you, so come out. Go on your way in peace." But Shaul said to the officers, "After flogging us in public when we hadn't been convicted of any crime and are Roman citizens, they threw us in prison. Now they want to get rid of us secretly? Oh no. Let them come and escort us out themselves." The officers reported these words to the judges, who became frightened when they heard that Shaul and Silas were Roman citizens. They came and apologized to them, then after escorting them out, requested them to leave the city. For the prison they went to Lydia's house, and after seeing and encouraging the brothers, they departed. After passing through Amphipolis and Ampolina, Shaul and Silas came to Thessalonica, and there was a synagogue. According to his usual practice, Shaul went in, and 3 Shabbats he gave them drashes from the Tanakh, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise again from the dead, and that this Yeshua, whom I am proclaiming to you, is the Messiah. Some of the Jews were persuaded and threw in their lot with Shaul and Silas, as did a great many of the Greek men who were God-fearers, and not a few of the leading women. But the unbelieving Jews grew jealous. So they got together some vicious men, and the riffraff hanging around the market square collected a crowd and started a riot in the city. They attacked Jason's house, hoping to bring Shaul and Silas out to the mob. But when they didn't find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city authorities and shouted, "These men have turned the whole world upside down, have come here too. Jason has let them stay in his home. All of them defying the decree of the emperor because they assert that there is another king, Yeshua." Their words threw the crowd and the authorities into a turmoil, so that only after Jason and the others had posted bond did they let them go. But as soon as night fell, the brothers sent Shaul and Silas off to Berea. As soon as they arrived, they went to the synagogue. Now the people here were a noble character, that the ones in Thessalonica, they eagerly welcomed the message, checking the Tanakh every day to see if the things that Shaul were saying were true. Many of them came to trust, as did a number of prominent Greek women and not a few Greek men. But when the unbelieving Jews of Thessalonica learned that the word of God had been proclaimed by Shaul and Berea as well, they went there too to make trouble and agitate the crowds. The brothers sent Shaul away at once to go down to the seacoast, when Silas and Timothy stayed behind. Shaul's escort went with him as far as Athens, then left with instructions for Silas and Timothy to come as quickly as they could. While Shaul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit within him was disturbed at the sight of the city full of idols. So he began holding discussions in the synagogues with the Jews and the God-fearers, in the market square every day with the people who had happened to be there. Also, a group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers started meeting with him. Some asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others, because he proclaimed the good news about Yeshua and the resurrection, said, "He sounds like a protagonist for foreign gods." They took and brought him before the high council, saying, "May we know what this teaching is that you are speaking? Some of the things we are hearing from you strike us as strange, and we would like to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners living there used to spend their spare time talking or hearing about the latest intellectual fads. Shaul stood up in the council meeting and said to them, "Men of Athens, I see how very religious you are in every way. Whereas I, walking around looking at your shrines, I even found an altar which had been inscribed to an unknown God, so that one whom you already worshiping in ignorance. This is the one I proclaim to you. The God who made the universe and everything in it, and who is the Lord of heaven and earth, did not live in man-made temples, nor is he served by human hands as if he lacked something, since it is he himself who gives life and breath and everything to everyone. From one man he made every nation living on the entire surface of the earth, and he fixed the limits of their territories and the periods which they would flourish. God did this so that the people would look for him and perhaps reach out and find him, although, in fact, he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and most and exist, and move and exist. Indeed, as some of the poets among you have said, we are actually his children. So, since we are children of God, we shouldn't suppose that God's essence resembles gold, silver, or stone shaped by human technique and imagination. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he is commanding all people, everyone, to turn to him from their sins. For he has set a day when he will judge the inhabited world and do it justly by means of a man who he has designated, and he has given public proof of it by resurrecting this man from the dead. At the mention of the resurrection of the dead, people so began to scoff, while others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." So Shaul left the meeting, but some men stayed with him and came to trust, including the high council member Dionysius. There was also a woman named Damaris, and others came to trust along with them. After this, Shaul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jewish man named Aquila, accordingly from Pontus, but having recently come with his wife Priscilla from Italy, because Claudius had issued a decree expelling all the Jews from Rome. Shaul went to see them, and because he had the same trade as they, making tents, he stayed on with them and they worked together. Shaul also began carrying on discussions every Shabbat in the synagogue, where he tried to convince both Jews and Greeks. But after Celia and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Shaul felt presence by the urgency of the message and testified in depth to the Jews of Yeshua the Messiah. However, when they set themselves against him and began hurling insults, he shook out his clothes and said to him, "Your blood be on your own heads. For my part, I am clean. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." And he left them and went into the home of the God-fearers named Titus Justus, whose house was right next door to the synagogues. Cyprus, the president of the synagogue, came to trust in the Lord along with his whole household. Also, many of the Corinthians who had trusted and were immersed. One night in a vision, the Lord said to Shaul, "Don't be afraid, but speak right up and don't stop, because I am with you. No one will succeed in harming you, for I have many people in this city." So Shaul stayed there for 1.5 years, teaching them the word of God. But when Gallo became the Roman governor of Achaia, an unbelieving Jew made a concerned attack on Shaul and took him to court, saying, "This man is trying to persuade people to worship God in the way that violate the Torah." Shaul just came about to open his mouth when Gallio said to the Jews, "Listen, you Jews, if this were a case that inflicted injury or a serious crime, I could reasonably be expect to hear you out patiently. But since it involves questions about words and names and your own laws, you must deal with it yourselves. I flatly refuse to judge such matters." He had them ejected from the court. They all grabbed Sosians, the presidents of the synagogues, and gave him a beating in full view of the bench, but Gallio showed no concern whatever. Shaul remained for some time, then said goodbye to the brothers and sailed off to Syria after having his hair cut short in Cenchrea, because he had taken a vow with Priscilla and Aquila. They came to Ephesus, and he left them there. But he himself went into the synagogue and held dialogue with the Jews. When they asked him to stay with them longer, he declined. However, in his farewell, he said, "God willing, I will come back to you." Then he set sail for Ephesus. After landing in Caesarea, he went up to Jerusalem and greeted the Messianic communities. He sat down to Antioch. Then he came down to Antioch, spent some time there, and afterwards set out and passed systematically through the region of Galatia, Phrygia, strengthening all the Talmudim. Meanwhile, a Jewish man named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent speaker with a thorough knowledge of the Tanakh. This man had been informed about the way of the Lord. With great spiritual fervor, he spoke and taught accurately the facts about Yeshua, but he knew only the immersion of Yochanan. He began to speak out boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God in fuller detail. When he made the plans to cross over in Acacia, Brothers encouraged him and wrote the Talmud to welcome him. On arrival, he greatly helped those who through grace had come to trust, and he powerfully and convulsively refused an unbelieving Jews in public, demonstrating by the Tanakh that Yeshua is the Messiah.